It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, February 15th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is really intrigued by what the Flyers goaltending situation is and, what are the next steps here?
Intrigued, confused. There's a few other words.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the latest news with the Flyers with a new executive, and we will get to your mailbag questions all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. That is where you'll keep up with all of our episodes and Flyers news. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. That's how you get your mailbag questions answered like we're doing today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube. So subscribe over there as well. Russ, we got some surprise news from the Flyers, or more specifically, their parent company, Comcast. And there's a new CEO in town for Comcast Spectacor, which is technically the parent division of Comcast that runs the Flyers. And that is Dan Hilferty. And right now, Dave Scott, who is technically in that position, has been moved as a governor of the Flyers, and he'll be the chairman of Spectacor, if that makes sense. And the two of them will partner on the Flyers. And of course, Valerie Camillo was promoted last year, I think it was, to president and CEO of Spectacor Sports and Entertainment. So she's still there in her role. And very interesting timing, I would say, to bring in a new corporate overseer.
Well, I mean, for one thing, when you look up Dave Scott, he had a dual title, CEO and chairman, right? So now the CEO part's gone. He always was the governor, so he's still the governor of the Flyers. So technically, he's still the caretaker. But when now you find out that there's a partner, well, now you've sort of added another layer because both of these guys are in charge of Chuck Fletcher. And so, we know that there's going to be changes down the road, and this is sort of signaling that. And the same thing could happen to Chuck Fletcher, where they take away one of his titles too. We talked about that. That is a, possibility. But as far as just talking about this the way it is, my thinking is, having been in the corporate world, and you have too, is that you've now just added another layer. Now, again, we did talk about streamlining the organization a while ago, bringing in someone from the outside, and this is technically a lot like that. But you only have 3 weeks until the trade deadline. And so now this is just another person that has to, be in the loop. And you wonder if that will slow the team down when trades have to be made. Because, again, I think if things go the way they are, a lot of things are being talked about. A few things have been done as far as trades are executed. But there's still going to be a lot of last-minute shopping. And that's when you have to have a tight communications system here for an organization to get things done. And now you've added another person.
Yeah, you're right. It does add some complexity in the short term, but bringing in a new person from the outside at the CEO level, like you said, with our corporate experience, screams to me a reorganization within the company, and they want an outside perspective to help figure out what to do. And whether that means taking away the GM title from Chuck Fletcher and just having him be president of the team, that is a possibility here, I think, in a reorg like this. But it's very clear that there has to be some changes that take place, and this just says, we need a fresh eye on it. And so I don't think it should affect the trade deadline immediately, other than, to your point, some complexity with the communication around it. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because there is some lack of trust from the outside on management in terms of how they'll handle the trade deadline. But I think this is more of a medium term change that could happen, and there could be some bigger changes in the off season is something that I would predict, or different changes, maybe not bigger, because this is a pretty big change.
You, I was just gonna say, you wonder why this didn't happen in like August.
Yeah, it is a really good question. In
3/4 of the season's over.
Right. In terms of Hilferty's, experience, he most recently was part of the 2026 Soccer World Cup hosting bid for Philadelphia. So he does have some sports management there, but most of his career experience has been in healthcare.
Right.
He was head of Independence Blue Cross and worked for some other healthcare companies prior to that. So, it's not really an apples to apples. It's not really even an apples to pears, but knowing that, he does understand hockey and is a huge Flyers fan. He's from the area, and that he does have some business, sports experience recently. There's pros and cons to all of that.
There is pros and cons to all of that. Better to know hockey than not know hockey. But again, they're going to end up having a table of like 4 or 5 people on trade deadline day, so everything gets explained and everybody understands everything, and and you just wonder how complex it might get.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. This is another one of those things that just throws a wrench in the mix. But
all I can say is this: I've covered a lot of teams over the years in different situations for different things, and this one never stays complacent. Something is always happening. Something is always changing, and so we bring it to you. That's it.
Yep. And definitely a we shall see situation here as things develop. But speaking of some other changes that are on the small end of the scale related, the Flyers did call Kiefer Bellows back up for the road trip, as well as Sam Ersson. They decided they wanted to have 3 goalies with them. And, that's smart, in case of injury. So because the travel is so far, you just want to be better safe than sorry. And, that adds up to a 23-man roster in the end. So you might as well.
So does that mean Ollie Lixel's going back to Lehigh?
No, that's
he's still
23.
there too. He's part of the 23. That's what I was wondering because I was kind of like counting it on my hands. Is that still part of the 23? All right. Well, that's good. I mean, so
we have 1 extra forward, 1 extra defenseman, and 1 extra goalie.
Right. Oh yeah, because of the goalie. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's that. I guess that's what threw me. I mean, do you really need 3 goalies for a trip? I mean,
look, I think when you're that far away and a moment's notice, maybe you don't want to have an e-bug.
Okay. Pros and cons of this. Here we go. 1, they're not in the playoff race. 2, they make jets. There's a thing called jets that fly you anywhere at a moment's notice. So if one game there is an e-bug, is that going to really affect the Flyers season? No. So it's just kind of weird that they're going to take up a roster spot with this. That's what kind of blew my mind, I guess.
Well, I do think that there could be more to it than that. And that is a perfect segue into our goaltending discussion that we are going to have, where we're going to take a look at who we have on the roster right now, our predictions for the rest of the season, and how the team has been managing the load balance with goaltending so far. And we're going to do that coming up next.
The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000, That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sports app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. I'll tell you the one thing I would look at this week. The Lakers are playing the Pelicans. It's been tight with them last few games, and the Lakers really need to win. So keep an eye on that. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, Russ, we are talking goaltending right now. And, going back to bringing Sam Ersson on this road trip, it does bring up the question of whether Sam Ersson gets playing time on this particular trip. And are they trying to do some work to determine, what they think of him versus Felix Sandstrom at the NHL level?
I mean, I would have to say, if you're including him on the trip, he's going to get work. And, Ersson's played well. The coach certainly likes him. I think the way the Flyers situation is next year, money-wise, it would be good if they had a guy like Ersson be the backup, if the coach trusts him. So you almost could see that happening down the line, and I think that's why this move is happening. And so, from that part of it, just discussing that part of it, I understand why he's on the trip for that.
I think so too. I think that's a big part of it. And, I think that is a really good possibility for next season in terms of Sam Ersson being the official backup here. But kind of looking at the overall goaltending situation, when we talked about it at the beginning of the season, we talked about, needing to manage Carter Hart's load, that we didn't want to overdo it with him. And we've talked about it several times throughout the season that we felt like maybe he was playing too many games. And, if you look at how many games he's played so far out of the 55 games, we have Carter Hart with 40, Felix Sandstrom 11, and Sam Ersson 7. Now, that does include some partial games in there, so it doesn't add up to the number of games played total. But, if you look at that and project it out towards the end of the season in terms of the rate that backups are being played, that would end up with Carter Hart playing 58 games and a backup, either Sandstrom or Ersson, playing 24 games total.
And it's too many.
Yeah. Like I was going to say,
he's
how does
one
that sit
game
with
off
you?
the league lead. Yeah, he's one game off the league. Now, he hasn't faced as many shots because the Flyers are blocking a ton of shots. But if I start looking at high danger chances, it's been a lot. And so, again, if you go back to when John Tortorella took over and said they would do a better job of taking care of Carter Hart this year compared to last year, it's barely. I'm not sure they are.
It's really, I think, still concerning to me at this point in the season, because if you project him out to 58 games, we said he should be between 50 and 55, if memory serves.
Yeah.
So
and really more towards 50, 51, not really even at 55, but yes.
Right. The 55 would be the absolute high end of what we would like to see. And so this is concerning if it does end up going out to 58. Now, having the 3 goalies on the roster for this road trip, and maybe even further down the line, are they going to spread it out between Sandstrom and Ersson a little bit more and rest Carter Hart? Could be, but it just doesn't seem likely based on what we know about Torts and the way this team
I mean, let's just say what we think. At this point, we think Carter Hart's going to play most of the games. Ersson will get a few, and Sandstrom is there because they can't send him down.
Right.
And that's taking up a roster spot.
Exactly.
And that's what I don't like. I have to go on record about that. Like, it's not good roster management, but this is where we are.
Yeah. I think part of the reason why it's been such a problem is that, while you can say, based on having actually watched the games that Felix Sandstrom has played, he's had some absolute horrible defense in front of him
Yes.
for some of those games that were in, that period of time where the Flyers were playing very, very poorly across the board. So there is a little bit of, thumbs on the scale, so to speak, in terms of his stats, but um, it does stand out that Sam Ersson's stats at the NHL level are significantly better than Felix Sandstrom overall. And, especially if you look at things like high danger, scoring chance, save percentage, Carter Hart's at 824 and Felix Sandstrom is at 806, and then Sam Ersson is at 906 for
Right.
high danger shots. And so that's kind of looking at maybe, your breakaways and, key shots that they should be stopping.
So I look at it like that and say Carter Hart's number is fine, considering how the team is.
Yep,
I'm not upset.
absolutely.
Now Ersson is still a small sample size, so sometimes
Right.
guys come in and they play, like their hair is on fire, and maybe that's what you're getting. And other teams don't have a book on them yet, but they'll start to get a book on them, and that'll probably change, right? So Ersson is better than Sandstrom, but not like a country mile. But he is a little
Right.
better.
A
Sandstrom
little
has
better, yeah.
played well in most of his starts. He really has. I mean,
Mhm.
so again, this is going to be one of those things where you can't send down Sandstrom because somebody's going to pick him up. He's a good enough goalie that somebody will take him and throw him in the system. So now, you hope he at least plays one game, but I don't even know if Sandstrom's going to play a game. I could see it just being Hart and Ersson.
Yeah, and that's the problem I see with the way that Torts likes to run things, that he doesn't like to mess around with this. He wants some consistency there.
Right.
And so I would say Hart would play more of the games, and
Yeah.
then that Torts likes Erson. So I just really kind of see Sandstrom being the odd man out here, despite the fact that honestly, we need to see him playing with a better Flyers defense in front of them. And I would say on average, they're playing better in front of the goaltender right now. Not entirely. We've had some clunkers mixed in there, but I think on average, they're playing better
I mean, if
than
they're
they
blocking
were.
more shots, I don't know if they're
Mhm.
playing better. The high danger chances haven't gone away. Like there's a ton of them. And there's times where I know Carter Hart has gotten frustrated. I'll just say they're blocking more shots because that's what they're doing. I don't know
Yeah.
if they're playing better though.
Yeah, I think that's, I would say overall they are playing better in my opinion, but I think that, you can pick and choose some different areas where maybe that's not the case. But I think blocking shots is part of playing good defense in front of your goalie and not letting the puck get to him. So
It
it,
is,
I
but
understand the negatives and the downsides of doing it that way, but I do think that it's giving the goaltending a little bit of a break when they need it.
yeah, I mean, better than facing 50 shots a game, I guess. Sure.
Yeah. So, like, given all of this, what do you think the plan is for the rest of the season? And do we have any clues as to what they're going to do this off season?
Well, I mean, the plan for the rest of the season is I'm assuming Erson's going to go back down, or maybe on trade day, they'll try and send Sandstrom down and hope that nobody takes him. Maybe they'll do it on a busy day and hope that he sneaks through, and then they'll leave him down all year and leave Erson up. I really don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. Now, in the offseason, Sandstrom has another year in his deal. So are they going to include him in a deal somewhere? I mean, they might, but based on injury history for Carter Hart and not fully knowing what Erson is, if you're not going to go out and get another goalie, you probably still need to keep those three. But again, it could be a juggling act again.
Yeah, I mean, part of me was disappointed in the call up just because, it's a 4-game week for the Phantoms, and I would have liked them to
Right.
have the support of a goalie like Ersson, but obviously the Flyers and what they need to do is the priority here. I just, part of me is like,
Yeah, I mean,
but
Torts
the
has created
Phantoms.
his own goalie taxi squad. That's what he's done back when
Yep.
we go back to the pandemic.
Oh God.
But that's what he's
Okay.
done. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yep. No, you're not wrong. At least for this road trip. We'll see
Right.
what happens beyond that. But yeah, I do think that, my gut says that they're going to play Arson
Yeah,
more,
mine too.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and that because that's something that Torts would do, and then that Arson winds up being the backup next season, as long as everything else goes well
Checks
and
out. Yeah.
everything checks out, like you said. And then you know, if that's the case, they're not gonna keep Felix Sandstrom around the organization. They're gonna give him a chance to go elsewhere. I think they would have to do that. I mean, they don't have to do it,
No,
but
they
they
don't
can
have
give
to. He's under contract, so
yeah, they can give him an offer, I guess, to stick around, but,
well, no, he
if they
has a
were
contract. The only thing they could
yeah,
do is trade him or loan him out.
yep, yep. So that's a little sticky as well. And we have Alexei Kolosov hanging out in the KHL, which probably means, if both of Urson and Sandstrom stick around, Kolosov will stay in Europe for
Well,
another
there's
year.
still another Russian goalie that's somewhere out there in the ether too.
Yeah, there is. I wasn't gonna bring him up,
Well,
but
I mean, it's just he exists, Rachel. So at least we'll just say there is another goalie, and we won't even bother going any further because who knows if we'll ever see him again.
that is true. And what the situation with his contract would be at that point, we do not know. But there's a lot going on, Russ.
I mean, it really is. It's to try and keep up with all of it is difficult.
It is, but we're going to do that as the rest of the season progresses and heading into this off season. We do have some of your mailbag questions, and we are going to get to them coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, you got to try a Built Bar. My goal is to eat a little healthier this year, and I don't want to compromise taste because those bars are just not doing it for me. But you got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. And what makes them so good? They're covered in 100% real chocolate. They have some amazing flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And they really are healthy. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, but 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering yours at built.com. You can still do that, but you can also get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can get a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you have Sam's Club near you, run in and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, brownie, batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Okay, Russ. So we've got some good questions from our listeners slash viewers. Nick wants to know, other than Hart standing on his head, what's the path to being cup competitive? Going to this year, I thought the only thing worse than being terrible was to be mid, and I think that's what they are right now.
Yeah, the path to me is, circuitous. It's like you're probably talking about another 3 years. Like I think it could take another 3 years to really get there. If something miraculous happens, like injuries, like all of a sudden Atkinson's 100%, Couturier's back to himself, he's the number one center, and then you get Gauthier in 2 years, then maybe in 2 years. But otherwise, I could see it taking 3.
Yeah, I really think it's gonna take a really good hit on the draft this year with whoever they pick that maybe excels, to the NHL level a little bit faster than maybe you would have thought, and is at the top end of his range of performance, like to get there faster than 3 years. Because I think it's gonna take a combination of a couple of the guys that are currently in Lehigh Valley moving up. And then I also think that they're going to have draft picks for the next 2 years being contributors to a team. And so that's going to really take 3 years. It's rough, but I just don't see any other way, given the fact that they seem to hand out like overpriced contracts to people that can't get you to a cup. uh,
Right.
for the time being. We got to get rid of some of those contracts or let them expire, and then figure out a way to sign all these other guys that will hopefully be good enough that they need to get paid a lot.
It's a formula.
It is. Uh, Continuing our goaltending discussion from earlier, Donna wants to know about Troy Grosenick. What happened, and why hasn't he been around?
Well, I know he had an injury, and
Yeah.
now I believe he's back and he's playing. So I think it's really just that. I mean, I didn't have high expectations, but I will say early in the season, which feels like 3 years ago, he played okay. Like he played better than we thought he could. So, he's back now, and at least they have him in Lehigh, where right now they're without their best two goalies in Lehigh. And so, he's got a chance to actually lead them into the playoffs, really. I mean, him and Pat Nagel.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't think he's played yet, but I think he's
I think he's
close
close.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that he's potentially close to a return. And like with Sam Ersson not there, obviously Pat Nagel and hopefully Troy will be partnering up there. But we'll have to see if he truly can get back into the action. We got another question from W. Browdy. Which of the current or future younger players under 25 would be the biggest positive surprise going forward?
Well, I mean, Noah Cates is on that path for sure. In another year, Cutter Gauthier will be on that path. Um, in another year, we could really see Adam Yenning possibly in the NHL in a shutdown role. Wouldn't shock me. So, that would be not next year, but the year after.
Right.
And right now, I think, Devin Kaplan's on the longer path. I'm not expecting him for a little while. So, but again, he could be another one of those guys down the road.
Yeah, I think, Devin Kaplan is definitely on my list of guys that are going to maybe outperform expectations moving forward, but it is going to take him a little while to get
Yeah,
to the
definitely
Flyers.
another year in college and maybe a full year in the AHL, and then maybe we'll see him.
Yep, I think that's about right. And then John over on YouTube has an untouchables list for the trade deadline, wants to know if we agree. And he's got Travis Konechny, Owen Tippett, Scott Lawton, Noah Cates, Morgan Frost, Cam York, Carter Hart, and Sam Ersson.
Well, I don't think Travis Konechny is untouchable. I'll say that. I don't think Morgan Frost is untouchable either. I think everybody else, I think they would rather not trade. So I think you're right about most everybody else, but I think those two are probably not untouchable.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. I don't know that there's a market for Morgan Frost, so it's not likely that he would go anywhere, but certainly would take a call on him and see what the return would be. And
Well,
I do.
I'll give you a franchise. So, uh, Kyle Dubas used to be in charge of the Sioux, and Morgan Frost played for the Sioux, and you can connect the dots. I mean, I think there would be some interest there. I don't know if it'll happen at this trade deadline, but I do think it could happen.
I mean, I suppose anything's possible.
Right. I mean, I'm not expecting it, but I'm just, we're just spitballing here.
Yeah. All right. And last thing, not a question, but it's also our Flyers fun thing. On Monday's show, we were talking about the Flyers Marvel Day.
And I want to
And
protest here. You didn't even put the results on the show notes. You've kept me in suspense this entire time
I
because I
did
didn't go.
that.
You did.
I
I know.
did that on purpose.
I know you did.
All right. So we had a poll over on YouTube, and the votes are in. And by a very small margin, the vote for Gritty Should Be Hulk did come out on top.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it was exactly 50% of the vote. So it wasn't a true majority. So most of the votes went to me, and that Gritty as Loki makes perfect sense. And then there was a other option, and so the other option that we got was for Captain America.
Okay.
So yes, you are victorious in this one.
I'm
But
counting
I
this
will
as
be
a
back.
win.
I will be back. Well, we will be back tomorrow as well. We're going to talk a little bit about Flyers versus Kraken Part 2 in the beginning of the Flyers After Dark road trip for the
Get those
latter
toothpicks.
part. Yeah. Lots of coffee coming up over the next week or so. And then we're going to check in again with Cutter Gauthier and see how his post-World Juniors college time is going. And they did just have the Bean Pot up in Boston. So lots to talk about there as well. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you've got questions you want us to answer on the show, you can tweet us at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, or you can comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.